and unfortunately, it wasn't associated with my opponent or anything like that. You know, I've had things happen outside the octagon that happen, 2 days before a fight, and just you're emotionally spent, and it affects you on fight night.
It's funny, I've talked to guys, and I'm not going to name names, but who have literally been like, they had a breakup 2 weeks before a fight, and it completely threw them off because, their life's in turmoil a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard. Sometimes you can use it to your advantage a little bit, but when it's like a real emotional thing, like when you're either worrying about something or your heart's broken or something like that, it is not a good thing to fight with.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've seen it in the past where fighters will get super emotional at weigh-ins, and then they look like garbage on fight night.
Yeah.
Well,
so much of what we use to sell fights these days, though, is that emotion. And I say we, because as the media, I know I'm complicit in that. So we like writing about bottles being thrown,
Yeah, but it's it affects you. It affects you physically. I mean, like my thing, it was Thursday night before one of my fights in Newark, and my wife was coming down. She's 5 months pregnant. She got into a car accident. So I spent 4 hours in the hospital when I was supposed to be cutting weight, and I kept calm. Like my wife was lucky. I think she broke her pinky and dislocated her thumb or something like that.
So you're pregnant.
But yeah, it's like you're worried about the baby. I kept everything calm, but it's still affected me, and came back, cut weight from like 1 to 3 in the morning, got up early, finished cutting weight, and I got out of the first round of that fight, dominant first round, and it was like just energy bottomed out, it's like, oh shit. Like what's going on? And it was the most tired I've ever been in my life. And it's like, normally if I see a finish like that in a fight, and have opportunities like that, and I get this huge adrenaline rush, and it just wasn't there. So
it's got to be frustrating because the announcers don't know that. They're not talking about that.
I spent like 20 minutes puking in the shower after the fight because I was just so physically exhausted, and it was a tough fight, but it wasn't like that, it's just one of those things. You just have to, like, for me personally, like you said, I try to be very level-headed. I try not to let emotion come into anything, and particularly into this, but when you do have to deal with it, it is tough.
Awesome. Thanks, man. It was really interesting, actually. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can you tell me in the best way possible, day before while training with Lyme disease, day after while getting everything situated, what does it feel like as a athlete to go through that?
Like training with the Lyme disease was difficult. The hardest thing about training with it was the joint pain. I could be an hour into a workout, 6 rounds into jiu-jitsu, and I go to stand up and I'm posting on my knees and I'm easing up every single time that I stood up. And then, I'm on medication for a little bit, get back into the gym, and you're back to normal. It's like, okay, you might be a little stiff in the beginning, but once you loosen up, you're loose and you're good to go. As an athlete, that was probably the biggest thing that I saw, like training wise.
And what runs through your head then? Is it terrifying? Is it like, maybe this is it? Maybe my body's done, but I'm not?
Yeah. It was not so much terrifying, but, definitely thinking like, okay, well, I have, partial tears in my knees, stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, they're just starting to hurt. That's the name of the game. I've been lucky enough that I haven't had, knee surgery yet. So maybe that's it. But it was tough. It was tough to kind of to deal with it. And one of the toughest things was the focus. Just having a tough time focusing. It's usually pretty easy when somebody's trying to punch you in the face or choke you to focus on that and to deal with that. But sometimes your mind will just wander. And
Speaking of mind wandering and what you were saying earlier, I have it when I spar with people. I will, around 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in, all of a sudden I'll think, I like cheese, and then I get hit. Is that happening in the cage during a fight, or are you laser focused, or do you ever wander like, hey, look at that guy with his hat, cool?
the only time, I think one of my best attributes in fighting is my ability to focus. You know, I've dealt with a couple things that might affect people. When I fought Diego, I remember going into the octagon, and it's like, oh man, like, who's that? I know that guy, you know. And you're sitting there, and you're, what the hell is this? Like, where's your mind at, Jim? You know, like yelling at myself, like, what? Why are you picking out guys outside the cage? Like, normally I step onto that canvas, and it's like there's nothing outside the cage. Like, I'll see the fans or hear the fans, like, in between rounds, you know, like you pick your head up and all of a sudden it's like, then your focus opens up and like, oh shit, everybody's cheering. And but most of the time it's like the fight's on, and it is very, the tunnel vision is amazing. But that one, it was just like my brain was all over the place.
So last question, just to help other people. You see guys who obviously they train in boxing and then they train in jiu-jitsu, but when one goes to the next, when one transitions to the next, there's this gap where their brain's going, oh, okay. You don't have that gap. You transition so well from a grappling to a stand-up to wherever it goes. How are you perfecting that? Is that something you actually perfect, or it just happens?
I think it's just mindset. You know, it's. And I see it with some of the younger guys that I have coming up at my gym. It's just that mindset of like, okay, well, we're obviously training, so we're not trying to hurt each other, but we have to try to make it like a fight, and we have to try to keep that pressure on somebody, because you keep that pressure on somebody, and usually what happens is they get tired, and when they get tired, then things open up even more. So, I just try to overwhelm people, and that's always been my game.
I'm sorry to ask one more, but you mentioned pressure. People don't realize that that's such a hidden force. I see it all the time because I've trained and because I watch it. Do you watch people and go, he's breaking, he's broke? You see it because of pressure, and how do you react when you're doing it in the cage to someone?
In the cage, when you see somebody break, that is the biggest rush. I've seen it a couple times looking across the cage, and you'll see somebody sitting on the stool, and you see the fight leave them, and that's when it's like, oh man, it's like this is mine. Fight's over. For me personally, maybe I'm a little bit of a psychopath, but when you see the fight leave somebody, it's pretty intense.
Thank you so much, man.